Hello, everyone. Let's start the day with the clarity and confidence, right? So, this is Dr. Muzammil Yakateri, and in part three, we'll discuss the water-soluble vitamins, including vitamin B9, B12, and vitamin C. So, without any further delay, we'll start with the vitamin B9, that is also known as folic acid, right? Folate, as known as vitamin B9, is a crucial water-soluble vitamin primarily obtained from animal sources, the liver, and the plant sources, green leafy vegetables, legumes, and seeds. A key biochemical and clinical point is that folate is a highly unstable molecule, right? Destroyed by heat, oxygen, and food processing. This explains why even a diet containing folate may still result in deficiency due to improper cooking and storage. This has a major public health implications, especially in populations relying on overcooked vegetables. As you can see on your screen, these are the sources of vitamin B9, that is folic acid or folate. So, what about the properties and recommended daily allowance for the folic acid? Folic acid is water soluble, stable in acidic environment, and highly sensitive to oxidation and light. And the recommended daily allowance for vitamin B9 or the folic acid is the 300 micrograms per day. Increased demand during pregnancy due to rapid cell division, right? And the clinical takeaway at this point is pregnancy dramatically increases folate requirement, making supplementation essential. What about the active form of vitamin B9? That is tetrahydrofolate. The biologically active form is tetrahydrofolate or the THF. And THF function as a carrier of one carbon unit. Mechanistically, accepts carbon units from amino acids like serine, glycine, and histidine, and transfers these units for purine synthesis and thymidine synthesis, that is the DNA component. This makes folate central to DNA synthesis and cell division. What about the functions of folate? Folate plays a critical role in DNA synthesis, essential for a rapid dividing cells, protein metabolism, new cell formation, and it works in close coordination with the vitamin B12, forming a metabolic partnership, right? So important key concept is here, and related to this is folate deficiency primarily affects high turnover tissue that, and bone marrow and gastrointestinal epithelial cells. Folate is excreted in bile and reabsorbed, and this is called enterohepatic circulation. However, GI mucosal damage that may be caused by the alcoholism disrupts this cycle, and that leads to impaired absorption and leads to the deficiency of vitamin B9. This explains why chronic alcoholics commonly develop folate deficiency. So let's talk about the deficiency of folate that results in megaloblastic anemia or the macrocytic anemia, and GI disturbances like the diarrhea and neuropsychiatric symptoms like depression and disorientation. And physiologically, impaired DNA synthesis that leads to cell cannot divide itself, and that leads to large and immature RBCs in your circulation, right? So let's talk about nutritional anemia in a quick way, right? In a quick session, right? Anemia classification, you can divide the anemia in microcytic type and macrocytic, that is megaloblastic. And one of the cause of macrocytic or the megaloblastic anemia is the folate and vitamin B12 deficiency. Folate deficiency leads to impaired hemoglobin synthesis indirectly via DNA disruption, right? Folate and megaloblastic anemia mechanism works in such a way, due to the lack of folate, there will be a decreased purine and thymidine synthesis, and cells fail to replicate DNA. That results in bone marrow produces megaloblast or large immature RBCs. This is a high yield exam concept, right? As you can see on your screen, that's showing the normal marrow and megaloblasts, the large cells or large immature RBCs in your circulation due to the deficiency of folate and maybe the deficiency of vitamin B12. Let's talk about the folate and neural tube defects or NTDs, right? Folate is essential in early embryonic development. Deficiency leads to spina bifida and anencephaly, right? Clinical point, and at this very point, is that neural tube closure occurs very early and very first few weeks of the gestation, right? Therefore, folate must be taken before conception. So recommendation is that 0.4 milligram per day for all women of childbearing age, right? Must be taken in your diet. This slide showing the condition that is linked with the neural tube defects or the folate deficiency, that is spina bifida and anencephaly. So next is the vitamin B12, right? Vitamin B12 is unique in such a way that synthesized by the bacteria and stored in liver approximately for 400 days, right? And what about the sources? Sources only animal-based foods. This makes vegan at very high risk of deficiency of vitamin B12 or the cobalamin, right? What about the active form of vitamin B12? Active coenzyme forms are methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. Contains cobalt as a central molecule, right? Two key reactions that are involved, that is involved in as a function of the vitamin B12, that is homocysteine to methionine formation or the methylation reaction, and the second one is the methylmalonyl CoA formation, methylmalonyl A2 succinyl CoA formation, right? And that is also essential for the DNA synthesis and myelin formation. And what about the sources of vitamin B12? Vitamin B12 sources are, these can be obtained from the animal products such as liver, meat, fish, eggs, and milk, and dairy products, right? So this vitamin is stored in liver with the estimated for almost 400 days, right? What about the role of vitamin B12 in DNA synthesis? Vitamin B12 is required for conversion of uracil to thymine. That is one of the nitrogen base for the DNA that is present in DNA, and the formation of thymine for the DNA formation itself, right? Thus, vitamin B12 deficiency leads to impaired DNA synthesis that ultimately leads to megaloblastic anemia. What about the absorption of vitamin B12? Vitamin B12 complex multi-step process, right? The very first one is the release by HCl and pepsin in stomach. The second one is that binds intrinsic factor, and finally, or ultimately absorbed in ileum, right? The terminal part of the second, the small intestine, and that is important in such a way. Intrinsic factor is produced by the parietal cells, and loss of intrinsic factor leads to ultimately the deficiency of the vitamin B12, that is cobalamin, and this causes pernicious anemia. And this is one of the key point, high yield exam point. Now let's talk about the role of role in erythropoiesis and nervous system. Vitamin B12 is required for RBC maturation and myelin sheath formation, and deficiency leads to the anemia and in nerves that causes the neurological damage, right? So what about the folate trap hypothesis? This is one of the very high yield Viva question, right? Or the Viva point, right? So in B12 deficiency, folate gets trapped in N5 methyl tetrahydrofolate, and that cannot convert into active forms. So resultant would be functional folate deficiency and impaired synthesis or the DNA synthesis. This is a critical integrative point for the viable point of view, right? As you can see, the normal cells and the pernicious anemia cell that's showing, um, in the smear of patient, right? What about the clinical features that ultimately link with the vitamin B12 deficiency? Uh, you can list as a pernicious anemia, neurological symptoms, numbness, tingling, memory loss, ataxia, and important one is a neurological damage can be irreversible, right? And what about the folate versus B12 deficiency? Both causes anemia, but folate deficiency, there will be no nerve damage. But in case of vitamin B12 deficiency, severe neurological or that neurological damage would be irreversible. So high folate intake can mask vitamin B12 deficiency. And this is a very dangerous or critical point, right? What about the deficiency, the causes of the vitamin B12 deficiency? That includes the lack of intrinsic factor, vegetarian diet, malabsorption disorders, or some of the parasites can lead to the deficiency or can be included in the causes of the vitamin B12 deficiency. So next is the non-complex B, and this would conclude our water-soluble vitamin series, right? So let's start with the vitamin C, the ascorbic acid, right? So this is water-soluble vitamin and strong antioxidant. Humans cannot synthesize it, so must be taken from the diet, right? What about the other properties that directly link with the vitamin C? That is, as you know, that is water soluble, strong antioxidant, destroyed by heat, light, and oxygen, along with, this is one of the most unstable vitamin, right? So, and what about the recommended daily allowance for this vitamin? That is 30 to 60 milligram per day. That must be taken in your diet, as humans cannot synthesize it, so must be obtained from the diet, right? Let's talk about its functions, right? Collagen synthesis, this is one of the major role of vitamin C that ultimately enhances the iron absorption, supports immune system, act as a strong antioxidant, and vitamin C is required for hydroxylation of the protein and lysine. This is one of the role of vitamin C in collagen synthesis, right? Without it, there will be a weak connective tissue, and that ultimately leads to poor wound healing, right? What about the role of vitamin C in metabolism and immunity? That is, vitamin C is involved in norepinephrine synthesis and enhances immune responses as the T cell activity and the phagocytosis process, right? The deficiency symptoms may include the bleeding gums, poor connective tissue, poor wound healing, and severe cases, tooth loss or open wounds can be seen, right? Clinical features of scurvy, there will be petechiae, bone pain, anemia, and historically relevance, point is that the common in sailors due to the lack of fresh fruits or as you know, the vitamin C is directly linked with the, citrus fruits, right? Infantile scurvy, that, there will be growth retardation, irritability, bone tenderness, and severe cases that may lead to shock and death even, right? So today we covered vitamin B9 that is directly linked with the DNA synthesis and cell division, B12 that is linked with the DNA and nervous system functioning, and vitamin C that is directly or the function as a collagen synthesis factor or the that helps in the immune response, the immunity. Together, these vitamins are critical for life growth and clinical stability. With this, we complete the water-soluble vitamin series. You now have the complete biochemical and clinical framework for all the vitamins. Those are water-soluble vitamins, right? If this series helped you, like the video, share with your colleagues, subscribe for more high-yield medical content. Keep learning, stay consistent, and think clinically. Thank you very much.